I kind of like to smile when I say just because you've entered the bill doesn't mean that you're set up to pay the bill. They actually are part of the process. We have 3 steps here. First, you're going to enter the bill. Then you need to choose which bills to pay, because unfortunately we don't pay all of them immediately when we get them, and sometimes we have different terms. Some may be due quarterly, some may be due monthly, those types of things. And then the third step, of course, will then be to actually print a check if we need to pay those bills. So how do we work with this? Well, there's a couple of different ways. One way is to pay basically a single bill at a time. We can do this by moving up to Tasks, coming down to Bills, and using the second option, which is to pay bills. Here I can simply choose a vendor, and I can make a payment. Before I do that, though, I want to show you something. Let's say that I'm going to go to Papers R Us, and maybe I'm making a monthly purchase of paper for 5 reams every month. I do have the option, once I select a vendor and fill out some of the information, to create a recurring payment or a recurring bill. We then have the option to choose when it should recur, every 4 weeks, monthly, per period, quarterly, those types of things. And we can put in a date range to start and end, or to end after so many occurrences. This would be perfect for things like bills that you always know are going to be the same. Maybe there's subscriptions where you pay an annual rate to get a subscription to something. This way it's already in there, you don't have to retype it, and it's going to be consistent. I just wanted to mention that as part of your bill entering process before we actually get to bill paying. Now, what about the bill paying? Well, if I use this particular feature, I can select a vendor, and you'll notice that Paper R Us doesn't have anything open, so it actually defaults to purchasing an expense. If I do Andrea's Crepes, we see the same thing at the bottom. There is no open invoice, so the only available tab is to apply to expenses, basically making a purchase right here. But we did get a bill from our cell company. Let me click on the right field. So let me go ahead and choose Ringtone. And here we can see that it does default to apply to an invoice, and it gives me the information related to the invoice. I could type in a description, I could put in a discount, and I could put in an amount paid. This would all be very simple, as we can see. I do want you just to note that the due date for this is September 27th. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to close out of this window without saving the changes and show you the second way to pay bills. I'm again going to go back to the task menu, but this time I'm going to choose Select for Payment. This is the way you can batch process. When I choose Select for Payment, it gives me a dialog box that lets me determine what I want to see, basically a filter. Well, first of all, I know that the 2 invoices that I have open aren't actually due until the end of September. So let me go ahead and change a couple of these settings. First of all, let's pretend that it is September, and I'm going to be paying my bills on September 30th. That will be the check date, and then I also need to look at when the invoices were due. Let's make this also the end of September. We also can base it on discounts if we have some of those discounts on our terms. We don't, so we won't worry about that. You can then include all invoices, or only invoices that are so many days past the due date, or with balances over a certain amount, or you can even filter by vendor. We're going to leave all of those as they are and say OK. And we get this nice box, which has a very simple thing in it, just 2 for us. But imagine that your company had 20 or 30 bills to pay all at one time. This is going to be much faster than working in the other window where we had to pay them each independently. So what does this say? Well, it redefines our check date, which we just selected. It tells us what our cash account is going to be, and if we're taking discounts, what that will be. We also can do some different sorting, and then we simply get to enter which ones we want to work with, if there are discount amounts, how much we want to pay, if not the full thing. Now these little check marks are what we can use to select or deselect. And you can see that by default it pays the whole thing, but I could pay a partial amount by simply typing into that field. It's then going to give us our total at the bottom, and if we had our regular checking account balance calculated, it would actually tell us if we had enough money to pay the bills, which is always a good idea. And then the balance after our checks, we don't need to do that, so instead we're just going to come up to the top. Now there are a few shortcuts here. You can check all or uncheck all. Again, if you had a lot of them, that might save you some time. You also can view the details of checks if you're not sure what something is for without having to close out or open different windows. At this point, what I also could do is choose to print. From our drop-down, we can preview, we can do a report. Let's go ahead and do a preview. This asks us what our first check number would be. And of course, you'd want to make sure that when you're running regular checks that you put in the next sequential number that you have. I'm just going to put in 101 for our example. You then can use different types of forms if you need to, and of course you can print multiple copies. Some people keep a copy of the check in a file. Otherwise, you'll just print one. You can set up your printing options as well. We'll just go to Print Preview. And there you have it. Let me zoom in for you. The default that we chose is a voucher check. So at the top, we're seeing the voucher portion. Gives us all kind of information about what it's for. And at the bottom, we can actually see that this is the check and how it will print. Of course, it doesn't look right because this is assuming we're going to be using pre-printed check stock and not just a plain piece of paper. But again, you get the idea, and you could zoom through previous and next, zoom in, zoom out, all of those types of things to see all of the different ones that you have. At this point, you could either choose to print, which I'm not going to do. I'm just going to choose to close. This brings us back to our box. I'll go ahead and say close. It says that we have invoices on the window. Do we want to print these checks? We'll say yes. It kind of runs us through the same thing. And again, I'm going to go ahead and say this so that it marks them as processed, but we won't, of course, see this happen. Once again, Peachtree also keeps me honest. You have to know what your next check is. So check your stack and your check stock and make sure you enter that. Then print. And the last thing it needs to know, of course, is did everything print okay? The reason it asks this is because if you need to reprint, it will start back at 101 in our case, or whatever the check number was that you entered. Let's go ahead and say yes, it's all fine. And there we go. Everything has been adequately processed. If you ever need to void a check after it's been printed, you can also do that from Tasks. Of course, we're familiar with the Write Checks option, but all the way at the bottom of the menu, kind of a little bit out of place, you also see an option for voiding checks. You would simply select the check you wanted to void, and you would go ahead and click the Void button on the bottom right. This, of course, would reverse the funds and the double entry bookkeeping that happened when the check was written. I'm not going to do that. I'll leave them all as they are. I'll click Close, and we now can feel fully satisfied that we've entered our bills, we've accurately put them into the system so we can track them, we've selected which bills to pay, and we've actually printed the checks.